BMF was the first group that was accused of being both a criminal organization and a record label.
Attorney Josh Schiffers says Demetrius, also known as Big Meech, is highly regarded because he never took a deal or snitched on his co-conspirators.
They weren't on Wall Street. They didn't answer to shareholders or flash their faces on magazine covers, behind closed doors, and sometimes out in the open. These men built empires that dwarfed legitimate industries. In the 1990s, while most of the world tuned into cable TV and booming stock markets, another kind of empire was rising, built not on business deals, but bricks of cocaine. Small-time traffickers banded together, formed groups, and those groups grew into something else entirely. Cartels, ruthless, militarized, and more powerful than most governments they stood against, these men who led these cartels built kingdoms, ruled cities, controlled armies, and left a trail of violence that no border could contain. And despite global efforts, international law enforcement barely left a dent. Because when billions are on the line and loyalty is bought in bullets, what's left to stop them? This is the rise of the most notorious drug lords of the 1990s, Pablo Escobar. If there's one name that defined the drug empire of the 1990s, it was Pablo Escobar. He was the blueprint, the man who turned cocaine into an international industry and made himself one of the wealthiest criminals in history. At the height of his power, Escobar's cartel was moving 15 tons of cocaine into the U.S. every single day. His net worth, adjusted for today, sits somewhere around $80 billion, and most of it flowed straight from the jungles of Colombia into American veins. But Escobar didn't just smuggle drugs. He erased anyone who stood in his way. He bombed a commercial airliner just to kill a political candidate. The target didn't board the flight, but 110 innocent people did, and no one survived. In Colombia, fear and power became the same thing. Escobar paid off officials, bought entire neighborhoods, and even funded schools and clinics to paint himself as a man of the people. But his violence became too loud to ignore. In 1991, he struck a deal to avoid extradition by building his own prison, literally. But even that wasn't enough. He escaped, and for a while, he vanished into the hills. Then came 1993. A rooftop in Medellin. Police closed in, and he ran. And just like that, the man who once ruled a nation from the shadows lay dead, riddled with bullets on a neighbor's rooftop. El Chapo. At 5'6", Joaquin El Chapo Guzman didn't look like a man who could terrify a nation. Average height, average face, but he was the architect of one of the most violent and powerful drug empires the world had ever seen. El Chapo led the Sinaloa cartel, the biggest drug pipeline into the U.S. Cocaine, meth, heroin, marijuana, all smuggled across borders in tons through tunnels, trucks, and even planes. If it was illegal and addictive, his cartel had a hand in it. Much later on, in 2006, he broke a long-standing truce between cartels and ordered an assassination. That one move ignited the Mexican drug war, a bloody, chaotic conflict that would leave over 60,000 dead and 12,000 kidnapped. And while the country bled, El Chapo became a billionaire. But no empire lasts untouched. He was arrested in 1993, but prison didn't stop him. From inside, he ran operations like nothing had changed, bribed guards, intimidated officials, and 8 years later, he escaped. His freedom bought with $2 million and 78 corrupt hands. He was caught again in 2015, but like a scene from a movie, he vanished again months later through a hole under his prison shower and into a mile-long tunnel. To some, he was a Robin Hood figure, dodging capture with a smile. To others, a ruthless murderer who used charm to hide cruelty. Either way, when news of his third arrest hit social media, one comment said it best: "Don't get too comfortable. He'll escape again." Amado Fuentes. They called him the Lord of the Skies, not because he ruled from a mountaintop, but because his empire flew over borders in wide-body jets carrying more cocaine than any trafficker dared dream. While others used back roads and tunnels, Amado Carrillo Fuentes used 727s. His ambition was to outdo everyone else. He wanted to flood the U.S. with 4 times the cocaine of his rivals, and for a while, he did just that. Plane after plane, shipment after shipment, his reach was unmatched. At the height of his power, he led the Juarez cartel, one of the most feared criminal organizations in Mexico. But he was different. He was quiet, diplomatic, and calculated. As opposed to chasing headlines, he built an empire in the shadows, and his estimated $25 billion fortune made him arguably the richest man on earth at the time. Even the DEA labeled him the most powerful drug trafficker of his era. But no one runs forever. In 1997, with pressure mounting and law enforcement closing in, Amado made a desperate move. He went under the knife, choosing plastic surgery to change his face and vanish. But he died on the operating table. Just like that, the man who controlled the skies was grounded forever. To this day, some believe he faked his death. Others say it was karma. Whatever the truth, the Lord of the Skies vanished just as mysteriously as he rose. Ramon Arellano Felix. If Pablo Escobar was the king of cocaine, Ramon Arellano Felix was the face of raw terror. In the world of drug cartels, Ramon was the enforcer and the most violent of the Arellano Felix brothers. He built an army, trained, armed, and brutal paramilitary forces that weren't afraid to get their hands dirty. And neither was he. His job was to kill anyone who stood in the way. Rival traffickers, honest cops, judges, pregnant women, even children. In 1996, a state prosecutor was gunned down outside his home in Tijuana. More than 100 bullets riddled his body. Then, the killers drove over him again and again. And he didn't do it alone. He recruited the sons of Tijuana's elite, rich kids known as narco juniors. These were the privileged and weaponized gang members. But the law was closing in. By the mid-90s, Ramon's name was everywhere, from indictments in San Diego to the FBI's most wanted list. In the 2000s, U.S. authorities hit the cartel with Kingpin Act sanctions, trying to choke their money flow. But Ramon kept slipping through, hiding behind bribes and bullets. Then came Mazatlan. It seemed like just another violent night, a gunfight outside a hotel with 3 armed men in a beat-up Volkswagen. 2 were killed, but weeks later, authorities confirmed what few dared believe. One of the dead was Ramon Arellano Felix. The man who terrorized Mexico's streets for over a decade had been brought down, not in the same grand raid, but in a shootout at a checkpoint. Oziel Guillen. Oziel Cardenas Guillen's nickname is one you don't forget. They called him El Mata Amigos, the friend killer. In 1996, Salvador Gomez was next in line to lead the Gulf Cartel, one of Mexico's most influential trafficking networks. He was also Oziel's friend. But when power called, friendship died. Oziel murdered him, and the throne was his. Under Cardenas, the Gulf Cartel didn't just traffic drugs, it became a war machine. He reached into the Mexican military and pulled out some of its most elite fighters. These were ex-special forces, trained, deadly, loyal. Oziel turned them into his own private army, a group known simply as Los Zetas. Suddenly, the Gulf Cartel became untouchable. But hubris is a dangerous drug. In 1999, Cardenas made a mistake. He cornered 2 DEA agents and threatened their lives while they were protecting an informant in Matamoros. That single move triggered a storm. The full weight of the U.S. government came down on him. In 2003, he was captured and, after years of legal wrestling, extradited to the United States. Today, Oziel Cardenas Guillen sits behind bars in a Texas prison. After his fall, Los Zetas broke away. No longer mercenaries, but monsters of their own making. Gilberto Orihuela. They called him El Ajedrecista, the chess player. And just like the game, Gilberto Rodriguez Orihuela moved carefully, silently, always thinking 10 steps ahead. As the co-founder of the Cali cartel, Gilberto and his brother Miguel built one of the most powerful drug empires the world has ever seen. 80% of the cocaine flooding into the United States carried the invisible stamp of the Cali cartel. From cocoa fields in the Andes to street dealers in New York, Gilberto's network was in total control. 200 tons of cocaine poured into the U.S. under his watch. They hid it in ceramic tiles, coffee shipments, frozen vegetables, and even concrete poles. Between 1990 and 1993 alone, U.S. authorities estimated that these exports earned the cartel over $1.3 billion. But Gilberto wasn't just fighting the DEA. He was also battling Pablo Escobar. In the early 80s, the two cartels had an uneasy truce, sharing territory and working to stabilize the drug markets. But when Escobar demanded that the Cali cartel join his bloody campaign to stop extradition to the U.S., Gilberto refused. And that was it. "If you're not my friend, you're my enemy," Escobar told him. The war was on. The walls finally closed in on June 9, 1995. Gilberto was captured at one of his lavish properties in Cali. In 2006, he was extradited to the United States, where he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. For nearly 17 years, Gilberto served time in a federal prison in North Carolina. And on May 31, 2022, the man who once quietly moved billions of dollars in drugs died quietly in a cell. Demetrius Flannery. It always starts small. A $50 bag here, a quick deal there. That's how Demetrius Big Meech Flannery and his younger brother Terry started in the streets of Detroit in the 1980s. But they didn't stay small for long. By the late 90s, their operation was national. From Detroit to Atlanta, Miami to LA, the Flannery brothers were running one of the most expansive drug empires the U.S. had ever seen. Cocaine flowed like currency, and the name BMF, Black Mafia Family, became legend in the underground. But Meech was more than a kingpin. He was a visionary of image. You'd find him in VIP booths, brushing shoulders with the likes of T.I., Diddy, Fabulous, and Young Jeezy. Not just as a fan, but as a peer. He knew the power of music, of fame, of brand. So he created BMF Entertainment, a flashy promotional agency that, on the surface, looked like a gateway for rap stars. Behind the scenes, it was the perfect front. But the feds had been watching. By 2003, the walls began to close in. After a 2-year investigation, indictments dropped and the empire fell. Meech was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison while the world kept spinning. In 2024, after serving nearly 2 decades, Demetrius Flannery walked free. According to his attorney, Meech spent his time behind bars doing something few expected. He used his time in prison to focus on personal growth, she said. Now, he's rebuilding a life. Klaus Brunsma, Cor van Hout, Willem Holleda, Willem Enstra. Klaus Brunsma, Cor van Hout, Willem Holleda, and Willem Enstra were notorious figures in Dutch organized crime, known collectively in the criminal world as Pinozy. Klaus Brunsma, nicknamed the King of Drugs, ran a massive international drug trafficking empire and was closely tied to the Rotterdam underworld. Cor van Hout gained fame through high-profile robberies and was involved in extortion and drug trafficking. Willem Holleda, perhaps the most infamous of them all, rose to power after orchestrating the 1983 Heineken kidnapping with Van Hout. He later became a feared mobster involved in blackmail, drug crimes, and multiple murders. Holleda's criminal empire began to unravel in 2007 after he was convicted of extorting real estate mogul Willem Enstra and drug dealer Kees Houtman, both later found dead. What shook the public was the testimony of Holleda's sisters, Astrid and Sonia, who turned against him. Astrid even wrote a best-selling memoir detailing their violent upbringing. In a trial held at Amsterdam's high-security courtroom, De Bunker, the judges convicted Holeda of ordering 5 murders and 1 manslaughter. He was sentenced to life in prison. The court also ruled that Holeda had formed a criminal organization and orchestrated cold-blooded killings with jailed associate Dino Sorel and murdered criminal Stanley Hillis. It marked the end for one of the Netherlands' most feared crime lords. In the end, every empire built on blood and cocaine crumbles. And no matter how powerful the king, prison or death is always the final move. The 90s were wild, but the drug trade never truly vanished. The names change, the tactics evolve, but the game stays the same. So the real question is, who's running it now? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the underworld, hit that like button and subscribe. There's so much more to uncover.